Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another session of On the Couch. I'm saying good morning if you're in the UK, but good afternoon, good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. On the Couch is the podcast for creative professionals everywhere. We're part of the Creatives Group, a private networking group for creative professionals of all industries to come together, connect, support, develop and grow their creative businesses. I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Julie Hyde-Mute.
And this is On the Couch. Julie, who is on the couch with us today?
And we have PTOLEMY ELRINGTON. Hello, PTOLEMY.
Hello.
Nice to have you join us all the way from Brighton here in the UK. Well, PTOLEMY is a sculptor and has been a professional sculptor for the past 20 years. He's very much an eco-artist, to coin a phrase, using recycled items and materials in his artworks, which mostly feature wild animals and creatures. And his work has been shown and exhibited in London and the South East here in the UK, and also in exhibitions in Ireland, Greece, Spain, and Russia. And his business profile on LinkedIn is Hubcap Creatures. So, PTOLEMY, let's kick off by asking you, out of all the junk out there, why hubcap?
Well, it's not just hubcaps that I'm working with at the moment. I also use old shopping trolleys, car parts, plastic and things like that. But I have to confess that my one true sculpture love is hubcaps. They're very pretty to me, shiny, silver, available. And they, ingredients wise, they have a great deal of potential. I find them easy to work with, although I've been doing it for many years. I know a few people that have tried to work with them and have found it a little bit more difficult than they imagined. But it's kind of like a little niche thing for me as well, because there are a few other people that I've inspired to have a go at doing what I do. But as far as I'm aware, I'm the only full-time hubcap artist.
Yeah, because I've never seen it before. Before I saw your beautiful creations on LinkedIn, and I'm so glad I did, because anybody, please go follow PTOLEMY because his sculptures are just amazing. But how difficult is it to do hubcaps? And also, because of the progression of modern cars, are hubcaps getting more difficult to find with the advent of alloy wheels and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. That's a question that's been put to me before in terms of running out of materials. Yeah, there are a lot more alloy wheels around than when I first started, but that means that there's also a lot more hubcaps because people don't want them anymore. So actually, there's a strange subculture of hubcap collectors who obsess about all the different types, and occasionally I get negative comments from them about the fact that I've used a particularly rare one in a way that they don't think is appropriate, which amuses me. But there are loads and loads and loads. I'm not going to run out of them in my lifetime. In my studio, I've got maybe 2,000 or so. I used to trade them sometimes with collectors. If I have a rare one, they're happy to give me a bag of 10, for my one rare one, so I can build up my stock like that, because I'm not fussy. I mean, I know what I want to use. It doesn't have to be a rare one. Basically I've got them coming out my ears.
So your studio is just like a rubbish dump.
It's a little bit more way. It's a bit more orderly than a rubbish dump, and smells a lot nicer. Yeah, I do have an enormous amount of junk.
Oh, bless you. Well, if there's any people out there who are coveting that rare hubcap, you never know who's out there, get in touch with PTOLEMY, because he might actually have it and he might trade you for some other ones for his sculptures. Know. So how is using, I mean, you touched on it earlier about it's quite difficult to use hubcaps in sculpture. Tell us a little bit more about that. Why is it more difficult than some people might think?
Well, because the car hubcaps, or wheel trims as we call them in the UK, are made by so many different companies internationally, and also there's a great aftermarket sort of hubcap thing going on. You can buy all sorts of unusual designs. And so basically what I'm trying to tell you is that they're made out of loads and loads of different sorts of plastics. So some of them extremely flexible, easy to cut, easy to work with. Some of them are very brittle. Some of them almost impossible to work with. Obviously, because I've been doing it for this length of time, I'm familiar with, in a general sense, with most of them about the composite materials and how they behave in the ways that I want them to. But there's a lot of physical hard work. Okay, first off, especially because I deal with recycled stuff, it's usually filthy. So, and it's not a nice dirt either. It's not like earth or anything healthy. It's really kind of unpleasant. So, you know, you need full protective gear and you need to kind of clean them really thoroughly, even just before beginning. Then you've got to kind of source the shapes that you want out of the various hubcaps that you're using. And then you've got to cut them up, and obviously different materials behave in different ways. You can use knife, you can use reciprocating saw or various hacksaws, and they all require a certain amount of knowledge beforehand so that you know what you're doing, so you're not wasting your time and making life more difficult for yourself.
It's fascinating.
There's a lot of information there.
It is, it's fascinating. It's like something that, you know, I love meeting people like you, because it wouldn't occur to me to make something out of a hubcap. Would it you, Julie? So hubcaps. Hubcaps become beautiful art.
Well, I can run you through my initial inspiration if you like.
Yeah, please.
I used to live up in Bradford in Yorkshire, and I live fairly near a sharp bend in the road. There's some potholes on this bend, and it's quite a fast road. And I noticed after a while that what happens if you're barreling along in your car and you've got hubcaps and you go over a pothole while you're going around the corner, if the hubcap isn't necessarily attached very brilliantly, or if it's a poor quality attachment, or if it's started to come off, you know, maybe you had your tire change and it wasn't put on properly or something, you go over this pothole and bam, it pings off and rolls off and ends up on the grass. And I noticed a few of these on the grass, and they caught the sun, they were shiny, some interesting designs. And then a council dust cart went by and picked them up, and I assume they went into landfill, or they were, you know, put into one of those big furnace things. And I thought that was a real waste. I thought about, you know, somebody out there has designed that thing, it's been manufactured, you know, and although essentially they're decorative things, they're not particularly useful, you know, they're still like had a kind of a value. So I started collecting them with a sort of idea that I wanted to do something with them, but I didn't know what. And I ended up having a big stack in my house, wondering what to do with them, because I you know, I'm not a collector by nature, so I wasn't trying to begin a hubcap collection. I just wanted to use them for something. And so I suddenly got struck on the idea of like making a suit of armor. I thought it'd be really cool to make a full-size kind of human being out of these things. And so I started looking at them in more detail and fiddling with them and cutting them up and bending them and trying to do things with them. And then I saw kind of a fish shape within one of the ones that I was cutting up. And so I kind of made a fish, and then I made another fish, and then I made another fish, and then I made a shark, and it just carried on like that. And I still haven't got around to making the suit of armor, but that's how I began.
Wow. And because most of your sculptures that we see are kind of wildlife and animals that I've seen on LinkedIn anyway. So is that your main passion, wildlife sculpture?
Yeah, I was brought up in the country. My mum was a massive bird watcher. I was in the R.S.P.B. Well, it was called the Y.S.P.B, I think, when I was a little one. So, you know, and we always had dogs and chickens and all sorts on the farm, cats and things. So I've always had animals around, and I've always loved animals. So, and as I said, I started with fish, and then purely because of the shape of the part of the hubcap that I saw, and so I just kind of like carried on and on from there. I've had a few commissions of other things, some of them, you know, fairly random. Like I made a train for somebody. I've made a few full-size, you know, human sculptures. You know, I've done a variety of other things, but nature and wildlife, and particularly birds and fish, always draw me back.
Well, you have some very impressive corporate clients, and obviously you take private commissions as well. How do you balance what you do or what you feel as an artist to or with what your clients want?
That's a good question. There's a couple of elements to doing corporate work that I'm suited for, and one element that I'm not suited for. My work can be quite scruffy because I like it to look like the stuff that it's made from, as well as the thing that it's meant to be. And that can put some people off who like things to be really crisp and clean. That's one thing. Working with corporate clients, there's a hierarchy that you have to interact with when you work with corporates. And the higher ups in the hierarchy, the decision makers, the button pressers, the people who are in charge of the budget and releasing information and things, often don't necessarily have a realistic perspective on the needs and the desires of the artist. And so you have to try to bridge that gap. And that's useful if you have a good contact within a corporate structure, because then they can act as your interpreter, if you like. But trying to get the idea across to somebody about a technical aspect of the work, it can be quite difficult and requires patience and time. And luckily, because I've been working with corporates for a while on and off, then I've kind of developed those skills. And I'm not like one of those fussy people that rushes off and has a hissy fit if they don't get exactly what they want when they want it, which is something I have encountered every now and again in the art world. So generally speaking, I develop a good relationship with a corporate client. I've worked with some, and the thing is, I have my own perspective and viewpoint on corporations, but also working within the corporate world, I've met some really great people, some really sincere and positive people, which is good for me because it reminds me that life is complex.
Yeah. I imagine it's quite hard, and I think that happens with all creatives dealing with corporates. You have to make sure you're connecting with the right people who kind of get the whole concept, because artists, art is art, and some people just don't get it. They kind of want what they want and that's it. And you're thinking, but there is a process, and there is a creative kind of passion that goes on without it. And you have to feel it as well as just deliver it, I think.
Well, what is your process? I mean, if a corporate client comes to you and says, right, I want a life-size horse, for example, rearing up, how do you start making that?
Well, sorry, I'm just going to jump back because I feel like I didn't fully answer your last question properly, which is about a reconciliation.
I'm sorry, I jumped in too early.
Sorry. Oh, no, not at all. It's me. I started talking, and then when I get going, sometimes I forget the initial point. But you asked about how I reconcile my my artistic kind of sensibilities along with a corporate client. Basically, you've got to pay the rent, and I could kind of like completely focus on my own work, but if I utterly focused on my own work and I didn't take corporate commissions, then I would have to develop another skill, which is basically self-promotion, and I am so rubbish at that. I post stuff up online and I take photos of my work, but when it comes to like talking at length and selling myself, I find that really difficult. Even just finding the right avenues to explore to be able to do that, I find really difficult. I've got a child, and that takes up a lot of my time and a lot of my energy, and I find it really difficult, as I say, to do those kinds of things. So corporate jobs as they come along, provided they have an eco side to them, then I'm always happy to discuss.
Yeah, I think that's right. At least those parts of your values are aligned. You use recyclable things. You've got a very healthy interest in the environment, and if corporate has got that in their sort of corporate sustainability side, then, and I think companies are tending to more and more that way, aren't they? At the moment, they're taking a lot more of an interest of the environment and things like that than perhaps a few years ago.
Well. Cynically speaking, some companies like to tick the greenwash box. They have a budget which they're assigned as part of I don't know, whatever project they're doing or something, that needs to put forward that eco face to the public. But I've been kind of, obviously not explicitly aware of that, but I have been very suspicious of that on a couple of occasions. But generally speaking, as I said before, I am working with some of the people that work with corporates who have a genuine interest and a genuine drive in that area. But usually what it is it's to promote an eco product that the company has recently produced, and they want to get airplay. They want to create something that is noticeable and that will get picked up by the media, and therefore will promote their product, which is fair enough. And if it's an eco product, I can't really complain about that.
What's been your favourite piece to sculpt so far?
I can't answer that question. I've got quite a few favourite pieces. They're often, when I've done them and I finished them and I'm really happy with them, they're often commissions, which it's just real, it's terrible, because then once they're finished, they have to go. I can't hang on to them. But as I said before, we've all got bills to pay, so they do have to move. Most of the pieces that I make, I would like to keep, but I can't.
They are lovely. I mean, the pictures that you put up, we're going to show a few now. I'm just going to do a little slideshow of some of Ptolemy's work, but I can imagine as an artist working on something, I imagine it would be quite hard to let it go, because your work is really lovely. And if I had the budget, I'd be buying left, right and centre. I have to say, there's been quite a few of your pieces that have popped up. I want that one.
Well, you put so much of yourself into them all, so it must be like tearing your heart and soul out when you have to give them up.
It's a little like that. My focus and attention and my inspiration, all of those things that go into the work are clearly a kind of like a part of me. And some of the pieces develop such character when I'm making them that it does feel a little bit dishonourable to like pass them on, like you're abandoning a friend. Leaving your baby. I did have I've had two favourite pieces that I've kind of kept in my personal collection. There were three, but one of them got stolen from an exhibition and has never swam back to me. But who knows, maybe one day.
Oh, so who steals art? Shame on you, whoever you are.
How do you start off though, Ptolemy? If somebody says, right, I want you to do an octopus, how do you start off making something like that? What's your process?
You asked this question earlier, didn't you? And yes. To a degree, it depends on the client. Somebody might say to me, I've seen your work, I love your work. Can I have something a bit like this? Or would you make me one of these or one of those? So then I need to find out from them what size. That's obviously quite important, because if they're going to display it in their house or in their garden or something, or even if they have a preconception about kind of roughly what size it's going to be. So I need to kind of fit to that. Then obviously the material, and obviously the budget, that's quite an important part of it, and make sure that all those things are all kind of like cleared up. And then basically I just get stuck in. It's kind of like sketching in 3D, where I'll look at, for instance, I'm going to make, say, a stickleback for somebody and they want it to be 1 metre long. So I'll look at images of sticklebacks, I'll look at videos. If it's something that I'm not very familiar with or I'm not confident with, I'll try to see it in life, because that really helps, obviously, and maybe sketch from life or take some videos and then work from that. And then I just find a part of it that looks like the part that I want to start, and I'll find a piece that works and then try to shape that piece to get that to represent the section that I want to do. And then if it's not quite right, I'll chop it and change it, add bits, take bits away, and then spread out from there. And then before I know what's happening, I've got a stickleback in my lap.
Amazing. I just think it's amazing. So I know you went to art college. What drew you to sculpture as opposed to painting or drawing, or ended up other type of art? What was it about sculpture that drew you?
Good question. When I was in my early 20s, I think I was 21, and when I left school when I was 16, I did a few different bits and pieces, and then I partied for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and kind of just had a good time trying to find who I was and where I was going, but making it up as I went along, odd jobs and a lot of socializing and things like you do it when you're that age. And then I was kind of thinking I need to do something, but I don't know what. So I had a conversation with myself, what do I like and what am I good at? And the only thing I could really think of was creative stuff. So, because obviously I've done jobs, but working for somebody and, doing something that you don't particularly enjoy, to me, seems a waste of time. I mean, other people are happy and they have got mortgages and things. I'm not knocking it. But for me personally, that wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. So I thought art. So I tried to get on an art course. But at the time I was unemployed and there were certain restrictions, which meant I couldn't go on a full-time art course. I could only go on a part-time art course. So I started doing this part-time art course, and they worked on that, got a huge body of work together. Because, when I'm into something, I get stuck in, and I didn't have a family or anything then, so I had lots more spare time. And I just really got into it, and I created enough work and was convincing enough to get onto a degree course, which was a multimedia course, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Previously it had all been like drawing related stuff, 2D related stuff, pretty much, a little bit 3D. So on this 3-year multimedia course, I did everything: printmaking, photography, working with textiles, sculpture. And at the end of that, I definitely was leaning towards the sculpture and enjoying that part of the creative process. But unfortunately, the whole art thing, the whole art college thing, it put me off art for a while. I did like a lot of community art, working on festivals and giant parties, doing, making enormous kind of interactive sculptural things, and some painting work, on all sorts of different things for a while. But my personal sense of satisfaction and drive kept taking me back to making sculptural items, as gifts for people, as, just a hobby, if you like. And then slowly, especially with the hubcaps and the novelty factor connected to those, that kind of slowly kind of just led me in this direction.
So is that how a professional sculptor or a sculptor become a professional sculptor? You start off giving out gifts and then you start charging slowly. Is that how you make a living out of it?
Well, yeah, that's how kind of how it develops. I guess for some people, that's certainly how it developed for me. But I kind of would classify myself as a professional sculptor when I started. I formed a limited company and decided to commit all of my working time to being a sculptor, which was in 2002, I think. So that's kind of when I decided that to be honest, I don't consider myself a sculptor and I don't consider myself an artist. It's useful for me to use these words to describe myself so that people can understand, but I just think of myself as somebody that just makes stuff and enjoys it.
So you're a stuff maker.
Yeah, professional sculptor sounds a lot nicer than somebody that makes stuff. Okay,
so as a sculptor, an artist, a sculptor, obviously you have to have, or you need the talent to begin with, but what would you recommend to budding artists who want to become sculptors or budding sculptors? What would you recommend? What should they do to make a living out of something that they love doing? Give us your top 3 tips.
Well, commitment is the main one. Genuine commitment. I mean, even if you just continue to do it as a hobby, you really do have to keep at it for a long time. You have to keep working. And if you personally feel that you get a lot out of it, even if you don't necessarily get much kind of financial reward or, you know, approbation from other people. You just got to keep at it. You've got to keep at it, because it gives you an internal personal reward that you can't put a value on. That, I think that's enormously important. The second thing I recommend, well, I urge you to do, if you're a creative person that's like heading in this direction, is about looking. It's a teaching, visual teaching thing. But basically, I discovered when I was learning how to draw properly, that there's a massive percentage of observation involved. You know, if you watch an artist that's drawing from life, most of the time they're not looking at the paper and the pencil, they're looking at what they're drawing. And that's something that I've learned, that you really truly do have to focus on. It's very easy to make mistakes, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's quite difficult to step back from those mistakes. So it's always good to do your homework, to keep your focus up, to keep looking while you're working. Otherwise, it can all go wrong. And the third one is, I mentioned briefly before that art college put me off art, and I've matured a bit since then. The thing about it that put me off was about marketing, about pushing yourself. And at the time when I was at college, I was kind of like, but an artist, you know, it has to create art, and that's all that they do. They don't, talk to people. They don't talk to customers. They don't push themselves, because that's not part of art. Well, actually, yeah, I was wrong. And I've realized that since then, that if you want to get yourself out there, then you don't necessarily have to sell yourself, but you have to be prepared to kind of like talk to people and to do work that you might not want to do in relation to your work, in order to get it out there in the world. So yeah, you've got to work hard at that.
Yeah, and it is, especially for people like us who are small businesses and you know, sole traders. You know, when you're the person who is creating the product. I mean, Julie and I are the same with our video creation and media creation. You know, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. You know, you are providing your expertise in your service, but you do also have to be somewhat of a marketing expert, and you have to be your own accountant, and you have to kind of keep the threads until you can afford to pay other people to do those things for you. You kind of have to be on it. But the good news, I guess, these days is that with social media, it's easier to put yourself out there, to, especially visually for artists. It's great because Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, you know, you've got the platforms that are free that you can put photography of your art out there. It's not like you have to go and knock on doors or make those horrible cold phone calls anymore, is it?
Yeah, I'm going to personally go to galleries or something. Yeah. It was the web that launched me, actually. Because I'd started producing work. I'd sold a few pieces through cafes. This is while I was still a hobby artist. I sold a couple of pieces through cafes in Brighton, and I had a friend. I've kind of lost contact with him now, but he was into building websites, and he liked my work, so he offered to build me a basic website in exchange for some work. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And then one of those kind of online novelty sites that showcases other people's websites found me, and then that created a great deal of online interest, which was the springboard that got me to think, well, maybe using this as a way of selling my work, then perhaps maybe I can go professional and spend my life doing what I want to do.
Yeah, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
So
I found you on LinkedIn, you know, and great. And please do follow Ptolemy Elrington on LinkedIn. The details are going across the bottom, and check out his website, hubcapcreatures.com, to see his creations. Obviously, we've been showing some throughout this show, but it's amazing. He does the most amazing things. And when I'm rich and famous, I'm going to buy some too.
You get mates rates, okay?
Oh, mate, you heard it here, mates rates. He said it now. But he does.
Are you very pricey then, Ptolemy? Are you very pricey? Can only millionaires buy your stuff now?
Well, obviously, you know, price is kind of like very subjective, depending on where you are in the world and your expectations. We are used to kind of mass manufacture, so compared to that, you know, yeah, my stuff is expensive. I charge time, because a lot of the time my materials don't cost anything, so it's purely time I charge for.
Yeah, and skill. Because
skill and experience.
Creation.
To be honest, I think I'm pretty cheap, and people who understand and know about what I'm doing and how long it takes me to make work say that I undercharge, but I've had a few people that have argued against that.
Do you have payment plans?
I have done that occasionally, yeah, but it's all, it's small business, you speak to me direct, so you can always work something out. Oh,
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Right, we've got the last few minutes left, so we are going to play our lovely values jam game. I'm going to give my cards a bit of a shuffle. And then what I'm going to do is I'll hold my deck up, Ptolemy, and I'll run my finger along the cards. You say stop, and we will pick a card, and then we'll talk about that particular value. And it'll be very interesting to see what comes up, because these cards have been quite spooky with a lot of our guests. The cards that our guests have been picking have been so pertinent to what we've been talking about and what their own values are. It has been quite freaky, hasn't it, Julie?
It has, yeah.
It'd be very interesting to see what comes out of today. So, right, I'll try and do this. There you go. You see, so if I, there we go. So if I run along, stop. Right, we have got, we've got, let's see, love.
Oh, that's a big subject.
Card. We've got the love card. So, right, when have you experienced love, would you say, Ptolemy?
Are we talking personal or work?
Either, whichever context you like to I'll say work, because we're talking about work, really. So let's keep it to do with the art, I would say.
Okay. Since a youngster, I've kind of, and as as life has passed me by, I've kind of experienced. I've come to realise that there are many different kinds of love, but each one is, obviously valid and can be quite strong. And it's easy to confuse love with a number of other emotions and another, but then it's not on its own. It's kind of like connected and integrated with other things. So, which makes it incredibly, and it's also very subjective as well. So it's very complicated to kind of pin it down. But to be honest, work-wise, I don't know if I would use the word love to describe how I feel about my work, but I definitely do love doing what I do. But it's almost kind of like, you could say I love breathing, but you don't love breathing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a part of you and you have to do it.
But if someone said to you, right, you can't sculpt anymore, I'm going to take that away from you and you've got to go and be an accountant or something, how would it make you feel?
Well, one time I went traveling for a year. I went abroad for a year and I took a couple of sketchbooks with me because I knew that I wouldn't, this was already when I was doing 3D work, and I knew that that was kind of the direction that I was definitely heading in. So I knew that I wouldn't be able to do any 3D work because of the nature of the life that I was choosing to live for a brief period of time. And within 2 weeks of leaving the UK, poems were coming out of me. And I'd never written poetry before. Loads of poems are coming out of me. And I was sitting and sketching. So I think if I was going to be an accountant, I probably would get into trouble because I'd probably be sketching or something on the desk when I should be I don't know, doing data input or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe you'd be a bit creative with those accounts. We've all heard the term creative accounting. Maybe you'd be really creative.
There's some legal grey areas around that, I think.
Or you'd probably land up making animals out of your staplers and your pens.
Or sneakily collecting all the polystyrene cups from the drinks dispenser and making something out of them. Yeah.
I don't think you'd make a very good accountant, Ptolemy.
I don't think I would.
Have you done those year-end of financials? No, but here's a little polystyrene man I made from the cups in a canteen.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, it's been lovely talking to you, Ptolemy. It really is. and hopefully you'll keep in touch. And as Melanie said, anybody who wants to see this wonderful stuff that Ptolemy creates, just go onto his website underneath there, and obviously follow him on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Brilliant, and we'd love to have you come back one day as well and tell us some more. But that's all we've got time for today. This has been On the Couch with Melanie and Julie and the wonderful Ptolemy Elrington from hubcapcreatures.com. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.